There is no argument, you will not hear one, that is even attempted from a scientific basis. She just said, if a child feels or says. And how do you know that? If a child feels that they want to eat nothing but brownies. If a child feels that they don't want to go to school. You don't allow a child to make decisions based on what they think, let alone what they feel. There is zero scientific basis. You won't even hear them make it. I am confident in telling you that, and you still won't be caught flat-footed. So this is a comparison here, the United States, and how far left we are. And it's not even left. How far into depravity and degeneracy we have gone in comparison to everywhere else in the modern world, and even the non-modern world. So June 14th, the UK's National Health Service banned prescribing puberty blockers to minors for general use. Now let's look at other European countries who've either banned them or they've created some laws curtailing them, acknowledging that it's not good to put children on the policies differ from country to country. This is from the Wall Street Journal. You can go and do your own research to kind of see the specifics. But the spirit of it is puberty blockers for kids are bad. Let's put in some protections. Sweden, Finland, Norway, France, and those guys are fags.
Who would have thought? Those countries.
France, February.
That's the one that surprises me the most.
France?
Yeah. France, I thought, would have been far, far, far more liberal. And they're
not the Scandinavian countries?
Okay. No, I mean, they're liberal kind of socially, but I think even they're looking like this. This is really bad.
Plus, they have the population of Rhode Island. So
that's true. It's like 5 people.
A lot of strongmen, though. So in France, February 2022, the National Academy of Medicine in France cautioned against transitioning minors. Okay, this is what they stated. It said, there is no test to distinguish between persisting gender dysphoria and transient adolescent dysphoria. Key. Moreover, the risk of overdiagnosis is real, as evidenced by the growing number of young adults wishing to transition. However, if you would like to get a fake cock, I could probably put you on standby. France saying that. And the reasoning is important, that it's hard to delineate between persisting gender dysphoria, even if you agree with that, and transient adolescent dysphoria. That's very different. For example, you can have all kinds of conditions that exist within teenagers that don't with adults. From temper issues, personality disorder, sometimes reading comprehension, learning disabilities, to swollen nipples with boys going through puberty, Gynecomastia is something that young boys experience when they go. Only happens if you're going through puberty as a young man or you're taking steroids. Arnold knows.
I know about this.
Yes.
Elephantitis of the balls, those kinds of things.
Used to play marbles with my kids.
We all have to deal with what we have to deal with. No, but so I think it's really interesting, that last part. Growing number of young adults wishing to detransition. So this was in February of 2022. In the United States, to this day, they will deny the existence of any significant number of people wishing to detransition. It's a paper tiger. It's not really a good argument, right? So it's absolutely happening, and they are acknowledging it. And this isn't something that we didn't know about. This wasn't February of this year, and this information just hasn't been disseminated yet. It's over a year, and they're like, we're seeing a growing number, and this doesn't make any sense for us. We need to really curtail this. United States is like, full steam ahead. Chop the cock. I'd already said it. Chop the penises off. Sorry.
It's okay. You can say cock.
I don't want to, though.
I know. Yeah, you do. No, but here's the thing. You're right, and it's let me give you a couple of points here. It's a 1-2 punch.
It means rooster in French. We are talking about the
Thank
French.
goodness.
Cock. So it's a 1-2 punch. The government doesn't acknowledge it. And then you're removed on a lot of social media platforms, on YouTube, if you do the detransition. One of ours was removed, and I know that there were a lot of people out there. Maybe you guys can refresh my memory. Those of you watching, there were people who would have groups of detransitioners, and they would say that is hateful. There's no evidence for it. Look, here's the evidence as well. So we've gone through this 1-2 punch. Government doesn't acknowledge it. Social media doesn't allow it. The statistics are, if you have a child who thinks that they are transgender and you do nothing, you don't intervene, the vast majority, the lowest number you can find is 85%. The highest number you can find is 97% of them grow out of it completely. All references available at loudwithcrowder.com. We did a whole deep dive on that. On the flip side, if you start administering puberty blockers, that number goes down to 0%. Now, here's the really scary part. Here's the cold water. 42% attempted suicide rate. 42% attempted suicide rate for people who transition, whether they go through with the surgery or not. It does not get any better. So those stats are a reality. The government is lying to you. And even the French government, very progressive, generally speaking, as far as social issues, they're just doing this out of medical caution. That's how you know it's propaganda. And by the way, even if you do give your kids puberty blockers, Of course, there are the medical problems that you have to deal with, but it ruins every family meal.
Hey, Tommy, can you pass me the salt, please?
It's Tammy now, and you f***ing know it.
That's the clip I thought we had earlier. Now. Let's contrast this with the United States. We just told you about Sweden, Finland, Norway, France, UK. Okay. In the United States, we not only have states here that will allow puberty blockers, we have states that will hide from their parents children getting sex change operations. And keep in mind, up until relatively recently, I don't know what the numbers are now. I know when I read a book on this in 2014, 90% of transgender individuals did not go through with the bottom half surgery.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
That's a real commitment.
Yes. And we're now encouraging it.
We are.
We are now encouraging it.
No, it's gender affirming care.
Gender.
Because if you love them, and we'll get to California in a second, but if you love them, affirming their gender is a part of that. Otherwise, you're rejected.
It's the most important thing you can do, according to former Vice President Joe Biden. Yeah. And you have to, if you're a man turning into a woman, you have to affirm that care weekly with a medical dilation device. That's how you know it's true love.
Yeah, no.
They just want boobs and a penis.
It's true love's glass dildo.
I'm serious. It's a lazy art. They're like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get boobs, and I still have the penis. I get the best of both worlds.
That's true. That is true.
It's very selfish.
Yeah.
In fact.
You got Casey.
I wouldn't even leave my room.
It's so selfish.
Can you imagine productivity in the United States just plummets, and we're like, oh, I wonder what happened. Oh, you gave all the guys boobs.
Yeah. During COVID, everyone's Zoom camera is on off. I guess only my microphone works, and you just hear. You're not playing with your big fake rubber tits again. Yes, I am, boss.
Yes,
Nice set of hooters you got there.
You can do that over the weekend. You can always go back if you don't like them.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the United States. For comparison, in Arkansas, on June 20th, a federal judge just struck down a law prohibiting what they call gender-affirming care. That means puberty blockers for kids or sex changes, depending on where we're
Arkansas had it right. They passed a law.
Arkansas had it right.
Good. And then this judge,
federal judge, said you can't do that.
Right.
How long before a pedophile challenges? Hey, a child can. By the way, a child can consent to sex.
Yeah.
They can consent to altering their sex life forever. Forever. It's a sexual decision. It's not just an equipment decision.
Yeah.
I don't know how you have an argument that these children cannot consent to sexual activity. Just so you know, that's where it's headed. And by the way, there are movements like that right now. There are those cases going through the court, and my God, is it terrifying. The judge said that the people's rights guaranteed by the First, Fifth, and 14th Amendment were violated by the law.
I guarantee you, like some of these same things will be cited as, see, this is why children can consent. I guarantee you,
absolutely,
that's what's going to happen. And by the way, thank God Arkansas is going to appeal.
Right.
So that they could keep this. I just don't know with liberal judges if you're going to get anywhere.
Keep in mind, these are the same people who say, well-regulated militia meant adult, which back then was younger. So people should only, now it has to be 21 for them to purchase a firearm at all. But, adult can, at 6, get a fake cock. California, February 2023, there was a bill that was being considered that would classify parents not affirming a child's gender. By this, I mean not mutilating their kids. I'm not going to use this word. And by the way, I want to make sure, guys out there too, as we discuss this ever in Research Edit Pay, let's label everything so when we search it, it's mutilating children. I don't want to play this game of gender affirming care. And I want you to all go out and make sure that you say ruining children's lives, right? Giving them cancer, right? Putting them at risk of cancer, or genital mutilation of children. That's the term. Mm-hmm. Right. Just like they try to go pro-choice, nope, we're not going to do that. Just like they try to go love is love, nope, we're not going to do that. It's mutilation of a child. So this bill in California, let me read this correctly, it would classify parents not mutilating their children as committing child abuse.
If you have a 7-year-old who's talking about that they are not the same gender as they are biologically, then it should be affirmed. By saying and rejecting it in wholesale, then you're essentially rejecting your child.
7.
Wow.
Look at that reach. And by the way, go back to the Change My Mind, There Are Two Genders, the first one I ever did. The question has never changed to what is a woman, what is a man, how many genders are there? And the line of questioning is just, if someone is, born into the wrong, they think they're born into the wrong body, gender, you go, oh, okay, how do you know that? Well, they say it, but they're 7. Yeah, but people can be born into the wrong body. Oh, okay. How do you know that? Whatever. There is no evidence. There is no data.
No.
And by the way, the only evidence that they would try and claim about which they are wrong still would be based on a gender binary that you could have a male-type brain in a female body, which would mean that there would have to be male and female. There is no science that exists or historical context. You will never hear an argument. And I always, by the way, I always tell you to try and steel man your opposition. There is no argument, you will not hear one, that is even attempted from a scientific basis. She just said, if a child feels or says. And how do you know that? If a child feels that they want to eat nothing but brownies. If a child feels that they don't want to go to school. You don't allow a child to make decisions based on what they think, let alone what they feel. There is zero scientific basis. You won't even hear them make it. I am confident in telling you that, and you still won't be caught flat-footed. So you just ask them, okay, how many genders are there? And if they say, well, someone born in the wrong body, well, how do you know that? They might try and go to that, I believe, Swedish study, the Remedi study, which, by the way, they haven't read properly. The changes that occurred in a brain, again, male-female brain, only occurred after cross-sex hormone administration. There is nothing that exists to suggest wholesale that people are born in the wrong body. Hey, maybe that'll come up down the line, but you would have to wait for the data, right? Trust the science on the other genders. You would have to have a control. In other words, if you say there are more than just 2 genders, so now we're beyond the idea of male brain and female brain, you would have to say, okay, how many are, name the gender, and let's have a control group and the gender that you name, and let's see if there are biological differences in that makeup to identify that gender. Now, why do I say, you say maybe discriminatory if you're an asshole. I say that's what we do in all medical contexts. Not just for humans, for animals. You need to identify the gender and have a control group and see if there is a difference. You know what? We do that with people who are actually born intersex, which is a very, very small percentage of the population, or a very, very rare conditions like Klinefelter's, just to be clear. Those do exist, but we know how to identify them because we have a control group, male, female, and we say this is an anomaly. They can't even name how many genders there are, and they want your 7-year-old to be able to mutilate their genitals, and people in Europe say that's crazy. Washington State is probably the worst one, May 2023. The parents who would object, this is the law, parents who object to their runaway child wanting to transition, they may not be notified if their children is found. There's no legal requirement to. The child is effectively protected from the abusive parents if the kid runs away. My dad won't let me get a sex change. Great. Dad doesn't know where you are ever again.
Yeah, we're not going to notify Dad. Dad's still searching.
And it includes, by the way, we're not just talking puberty blockers, which they're banning in Europe based on science.
Your brother
this includes
at 7,
sex changes.
Your brother at 7 thought he was a superhero.
Yes. Yes, he did.
Thought it was a profession.
I don't think you should have allowed him to jump off the 2nd floor, but Snowbank didn't really break the falls.
There are ERs for that.
Right. Not in your country.
He doesn't want to be a superhero anymore.
There was a bit of a wait at the
Let me
ER
disabuse you of this notion that you can fly.
New York, June 2023. Again, all of these sources are available references. These are laws or proposed laws, bills that we're looking at. The state's Department of Education in New York is encouraging schools to hide the students transitioning their gender from their parents. They are encouraging children. Now think about this. Think about the teacher who we just had in the UK who admonished a child for not identifying his classmate as a cat.
Right.
Oh, that's just an opinion. You can't say he's not a cat. That teacher can now whisk your child away to a doctor's office and not let you know about it.
Yeah. I mean, the way that this plays out, the kid goes home as a boy, goes to school, goes to the locker, changes, puts on girls' clothes, puts on a wig, whatever they need to do, puts on makeup, lives the entire day like that until school's out, goes back, changes, goes back to parents, and is hiding something like that. Mm-hmm. The school now feels like they have the moral high ground.
Yeah.
And say, you know what, mom and dad don't need to know what's going on here. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You do whatever you want, live your life how you want. We understand you're being oppressed at home.
Yes. And I want you to know as you go forward, by the way, hit the Rumble button or share. And I do encourage you to join, obviously, Mug Club, because we'll be coming back to YouTube. This is the kind of thing that our very first episode back, we could be suspended again.
I predict it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a better than average chance.
And I know usually we break in,
way better
in
than
July,
average.
but all of the week of the 4th of July is Gun Week for 5 days in a row.
It's gonna
We
be
actually
fun.
have content the second week of July, and we will be back in August once we update the studios here. But this is one of those scenarios. First off, the United States is way beyond the pale. Okay, this is something. This show today, I know, would get us suspended from YouTube. We have to be very aggressive with the dump button.
Yeah.
But that's scary to think, because that means that you can't speak about this in the town square. And that also means that everyone else, or most other people, just in case I get fact checked, in Europe, the places that you think are bastions of liberalism. Look, I don't want to use them as an example. I don't want to argue from, just from this position of popularity, because they can be wrong, just to be clear. What I do want you to do is argue from the scientific and medical perspective, okay? Ask those questions. Well, how many genders are there? How do you know that? Argue from the fact that you are right, and you could substantiate it turning their own weapons against them on the same liberals who say, well, the gun policy in, oh, you mean all the countries that ban puberty blockers? You can't have it both ways. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have children on puberty blockers because Sweden and Norway and Finland and France, because they don't allow it. I'm saying because it's morally reprehensible, and I'm saying because the data shows us that it is irreparably harmful. But you often argue that we should be more like Europe. Does it apply here? Are you sure about those 5 minutes? I'm not saying this because it's your foundational argument, but it is an arrow that you can take out of the left's quiver. They always want to point to Europe, right? And they always want to say there's no such thing as first world countries and third world countries, and then exclude third world countries as it relates to violent crime and gun violence, because we're not even close to the top. They go, third world country is a racist term. You go, oh, okay, but how do you say that we're at the top of gun violence? Well, I mean, of first world countries. Why aren't you including El Salvador? I can't tell you that. Why? Because you're a stranger. So they argue. Europe gun policies. You know what you never hear? Here's another example. You know what you never hear people argue? They don't argue that we should have European gun policies as it relates to suppressors or silencers. It's not a political issue in the UK. It's considered rude in many areas if you hunt without a suppressor because of noise pollution. They know it's not like Corleone where you're showing up and you're assassinating someone in a restaurant. They know that. But you never hear people in the States arguing that we should have those kinds of policies. You'll never hear people in the States, the leftists in the States, saying, you know what? The rest of the world, industrialized world, they understand that this is a cliff that we're walking off as it relates to children on puberty blockers. You're not going to hear that. So I'm not saying argue from that position of popular authority, right? It's an intellectual fallacy. What I am saying is acknowledge that they do it. Argue from what... Here's the thing with science. Science is not determined by consensus. Science is determined by what's right. The consensus can be, at one point in time, depending on your circle, that the Earth is flat. But one person is right in that it is not. The consensus can be, at some point, that there's nothing wrong with asbestos and breathing it in. The science says that there is. But here's the thing. We have both consensus saying that puberty blockers, let alone sex changes for minors, everywhere outside of the United States, we have consensus with people saying, we think that's wrong. And they happen to be in line with the science that says it is irreparably damaging and it's child abuse. Does that make sense? Comment below if it does.
Watch Louder with Crowder live, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.